That was Dom. Here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A Canadian judge has upheld the Canadian government's decision last month to ban the outspoken British lawmaker George Galloway from entering the country for a speaking tour. The Respect Party leader led a humanitarian aid convoy of over 100 vehicles to Gaza earlier last month. Dubbed Viva Palestina, the convoy brought in clothes, food, toys, and medicine. Canadian officials say they banned Galloway on national security grounds, saying he provided financial support to Hamas, the Palestinian political party, which was elected in January 2006 and controls the Gaza Strip. Canada, like the United States, the European Union, and Israel consider Hamas a terrorist organization. Canadian Immigration Minister Jason Kenney has said those who support, promote, and help terrorist organizations should not visit Canada. George Galloway addressed his Canadian supporters and detractors through video link from New York on Monday night. He joins us here in the Firehouse studio in New York. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thanks very much.
So you're not allowed into Canada?
No, but I'm touring the United States to big audiences, north, south, east, and west. I'm sitting in the British Parliament, as I have done for the last 22 years. It's a bit odd to be branded a security risk in Canada, which I've toured many times, spoken at meetings in all the major cities there. It
sounds like, though, you're actually reaching more Canadians than you would have if you had gone into Canada. So what are you doing?
Well, the book that's banned is always a bestseller, and the speeches that have been banned are now taking place through the internet, through the ether, and 1,000 people turned up at a church in Toronto on Monday night to hear me speak, and 500 last night in Mississauga. I'm speaking to Montreal tonight, all from New York. And
by video link?
Yes, and it's good quality, I think, and the sound is good, and the people are buying tickets and asking questions. It's not as good as being there in person, but it just shows that it was a foolish move politically, as well as quite a dangerous one. It's a creeping problem, I think, in Canada, that their government is the last bastion of dead-end Bushism in not only North America, maybe in the world.
Why did you go to Gaza?
Because after 22 days, the Palestinian people there were in a desperate situation. We took 24 ambulances, a fire engine, trucks full of wheelchairs and medicine and children's clothes and blankets for the 61,000 Palestinian families whose homes have been destroyed. And of course, when we got there, we have to give them to the authorities there. As it happens, I'm not a supporter of Hamas. I never have been, but I am a supporter of democracy. And if the Palestinian people elect a government, we have to respect that.
Explain why they're saying you provide material aid to a terrorist organization.
Well, it's material aid, ambulances and medicine and wheelchairs and nappies for children and biscuits for hungry people and tents for homeless people and blankets for them to huddle up in the wintertime under. If that's terrorism, then terrorism no longer has any meaning as a word.
You almost didn't get into Gaza. You were stopped. Our reporter, producer, Anjali Kamat was there in Gaza. They got through Code Pink, the delegation. You ultimately did, but you were stopped at the border.
Yes, because we were a convoy of 350 British people, 110 British vehicles. And of course, the Israelis put tremendous pressure on the Egyptian government as to what can go through the gate at Rafah and what must go through the Israeli-controlled gates. That's why we're in the bizarre situation. You can take aspirin to the Palestinians through the Egyptian gate, but you can't take food. So you can't feed them, but you can give them an aspirin for the headache that they'll get as a result of being hungry. This is crazy. This siege has to end. Gaza's like an earthquake has hit it. The difference being, if it had been an earthquake, all the governments of the world would be airlifting the means of life to the victims of that earthquake and beginning to reconstruct it. And that simply isn't happening.
You were criticized, George Galloway, by some Egyptian activists and groups for coordinating with the Egyptian government in order to secure your entry for the convoy into Gaza. This is Egyptian blogger and activist Hossam al-Hamalawi.
To organize a trip supposedly in solidarity with the Palestinians, but you organize it in coordination with the local dictatorial Arab regimes in every single country who are direct participants in the Gaza siege. What this convoy did, that it might have brought aid to help the Palestinians and make them survive for one day, but they gave political capital to the Arab regimes that will allow them to continue the siege over Gaza for the rest of the year.
Your response, George Galloway, saying
Well,
it's not only Israel that's...
I'm very angry, actually. It's the first time I've seen that and heard that. The best people to ask would, of course, be the Palestinians in Gaza, whether or not our convoy was a good thing, rather than someone in an armchair in Cairo with the luxury of taking that point of view. Of course, your last two questions are mutually contradictory. You said that we found it difficult to get through, and he's saying that we were collaborating with the dictatorial regime.
You then negotiated with Egypt.
Both of those things can't be true. We went through 8 borders, 10,000 kilometers, to make the impact of the breaking of the siege. The entire Palestinian population in Gaza cheered us to the echo, and that's what matters to me. You'll always find people, as I say, from armchairs pontificating like that fool that you've just had on. When I think of the blood that we sweat to get there, it makes me very angry indeed, I must say.
What do you think is going to solve the issue there? What do you think President Obama should do? And do you think he has to play a special role?
I think he has to, and I sort of think he will, at the risk of incurring the wrath of other armchair pontificators. I think that Barack Obama, President Obama, knows, because he's a professor, and he sat next to the late, great Professor Edward Said. He knows that Palestine is the heart of the matter, that if we don't solve the Palestinian question, there'll be no peace in the region, and if there's no peace in the region, there's no peace in the world, and that includes New York City, it includes London. So he has, I think, to break from business as usual. Israel has elected a couple of monsters, actually. Netanyahu and Lieberman are the closest thing to fascists that the Israeli people have ever chosen. And, you know, we just can't go on doing business as usual with these people. We can't go on giving every dollar, every bullet, every airplane, every missile that's fired at the Palestinians to such people. We have to shift this paradigm. Now,
Does Britain take a different approach?
Not much different, but of course, given that Britain is playing the role of following the leader, in the case of the United States, if President Obama changes tack, no doubt the British will too. On some things, the British, for example, recently resumed discussion with the Hezbollah, still not allowed for US politicians. I think tomorrow they'll do the same for Hamas, because you can't choose other people's representatives for them. You've got to talk to the people that they represent.
George Galloway, we just read this in The Guardian about the G20 protesters that right now are inside the Royal Bank of Scotland and London. Windows smashed. One protester is trying to set curtains on fire. Computers, filing cabinets are being smashed. That's what The Guardian is saying. Your thoughts, if that's true?
Well, I mean, I don't approve of that kind of thing. This setting curtains on fire will burn people indiscriminately, and I do think that it is important that we don't play up to the stereotypes of the media presentation of the G20 protests, which are, in the main, and ought to be, protests against the inhuman, dehumanizing impact of globalized capitalism and its failure. It was dehumanizing and inhuman when it was profitable. Now that it's bankrupt, it is even worse, and people are suffering, their lives diminished and degraded, some lives lost, actually, as a result of that globalized capitalism. We say there is a better way, can be a better way, and we need a human economic system, an alternative economic system. You won't get that by setting fire to the curtains in the local bank.
Finally, George Galloway, President Bush did get into Canada despite a Canadian group, the Lawyers Against the War, calling for his arrest or deportation. The Canadian government ignored their request, though they did deny EU entry.
Yes, and on the grounds that I was a national security risk, which will have come as a surprise to the Homeland Security Department here and to the Speaker of the House of Commons, with whom I've sat for 23 years. Yes, I mean...
we have 20 seconds.
George Bush, dangerous killer. Here's $1 million fee. Come and speak. George Galloway, anti-war leader. Don't bother